We've been talking about the boundaries and how critical they are to not just stop doing things, but start doing new things. We're trying to create protection so that we can do the hard work of recovery. As we learn how to proactively develop this healthy escape plan, we have to proactively establish some boundaries. So today we're continuing the conversation of setting boundaries. Welcome to Celebrate Recovery Official, a podcast that shares life-change stories, courage, hope, and leadership wisdom, all centered around the Beatitudes and the Celebrate Recovery principles, where we face our hurts, hang-ups, and habits so that we can walk in freedom and the newness of life as Jesus promised. He died for us to be able to do that. When we can turn our life and our will over to His care and control, He will help us do just that. He has the power. He's willing. He is able. He's caring enough for you in your battle to walk through that. Hey, I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol and perfectionism. My name is Rodney. I'm the Global Field Director with Celebrate Recovery, and I'm so glad to have you back with us today. I got my brother Andy back with me. Andy, welcome, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me back. Hey, y'all, I am a grateful believer in Jesus, struggle with anxiety and depression, sexual addiction, and grief, and my name's Andy.
Hey, Andy. So great conversation. If you missed the prior podcast, be sure to go back and pick that up because we unpacked some really good nuggets in there. But continuing this conversation, and I would love to just kind of do a real quick recap. We're talking about the places, the media, the people, social media. What's the reason as we continue this conversation to even establish and unpack these things that we need to set boundaries for, Andy?
Yeah, we want to establish these boundaries so that we can, as we were talking in the last podcast, being able to mark out where we need to cut things out.
Yeah.
Because we recognize that they take us to unhealthy places.
Yeah.
And when I'm able to put a boundary around myself that keeps the good in and keeps the unhealthy out, it actually frees me to live in a healthy space where I can experience the abundant life that Jesus has for me.
Yeah. Just not to restrict all of the life. I mean, that's kind of we were talking about that on prior podcasts, that the enemy will kind of whisper through other people that, well, life's over now. I guess it's just going to be a big bummer. And that's not what it is at all. I mean, when we can, and it kind of makes me think of this, when I first discovered that I was hypoglycemic, I had to go see a nutritionist, and the nutritionist was kind of showing all these little plastic foods, and this is what you can eat, this is what you can't eat, and you should only eat this much peanut butter. And I'm like, oh, that's quite a bit less than what I was eating. But I had to come to this realization. It's like, okay, I've got to cut down sweets, she was telling me. That was a conscious decision from a wise counsel saying, this is what you need to do different. And I had to come to this realization of saying, okay, if I want my life to be different, I'm going to have to make some sacrifices. Even though I love to consume large amounts of peanut butter, what she was telling me is, this is going to kill you. Right. And that's the reality of what we're walking into this space. And maybe it's not physically killing us, but it is definitely spiritually killing us. Yeah. Relationally, it's killing us. And so I remember telling her, I don't know if I can do that. And inside, what I was really saying is, I don't know that I'm willing to do that.
Yeah.
And so I had to come to that realization. I remember she said this, that Rodney, you will begin to crave what you eat. And you know what? She was right. And physically, as I began to change what I'm eating, I realized that is in a spiritual sense too. And we'll talk a little bit about what's the good things that we're putting into us. But we have to first be really brutally honest about the things the bad things that we're putting into us that we need to get out of us. And yes, we need to talk about the things that we put into us, but if we don't create some boundaries, we're going to keep putting bad stuff in. So it's garbage in, garbage out. And that keep referring back to that 1 Corinthians 10, we're in the be careful. It's like, what is causing you to fall? And in my physical health, it was, this is causing me to have symptoms that I don't like. And the big picture is this is not going to end well. And so it's just getting honest about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And realizing, and I think food is such a great example. It's like, man, I can have this cheeseburger today and I'll be all right. But the cumulative effect of me having a cheeseburger every day at lunch, it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
And when we look at these boundaries, and you've said it a couple times on these podcasts, is that, I may be able to do this thing once, or I may be able to hang out here a couple times, but eventually, and that's the lie that trying to live under our own strength says, it says that we're strong enough to hang out in those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But eventually, if we keep letting those unhealthy things in, eventually it's going to lead us to start doing unhealthy things. And even if watching this sitcom is it, maybe there's only a 10 or 20% chance that it'll cause me to run to a behavior that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Or trigger a thought pattern that triggers another thought pattern that leads me.
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
Yeah. Well, and you and I have talked to some younger guys, and we lead several groups together in that vein. But it's interesting. One of the things we talk about, and it's good for our listeners to hear this, that typically we can find a pretty significant pattern that we say 80% roughly of our acting out happens from these things, right?
Yeah.
So what if the 20% is creating this place of acting out 80% of the time, then maybe I just need to be honest about that. And that's part of the denial process, is take that mask off, and getting honest is a big fruit of the mask coming off and saying, no, this is killing me. I need to deal with this. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that honesty, when we bring those things out into the open on that, we realize, at least for me, I realized, man, I was robbing myself of so much by just choosing to stay in these things. But when I'm willing to be honest, 20% of these things that I'm doing are causing 80% of me acting out. To me, the first time I heard that, I'm like, oh, I can change 20% of my life and it's going to have that big of an impact?
Yeah.
Okay, bring it on. Let's do this. Like, I hate the 80% that I'm falling into.
Right. Well, and I love that you said that, because it's important, even as you're journaling and reflecting and kind of going to the Lord daily, is take some time to do a heart check. Is, okay, with these boundaries, how is this changing the way I feel?
Yeah.
How is this protecting my heart and my mind, and not just kind of blowing by that? It's like, I need to sit in this. It's like, this is creating an impact in my life that I don't want to forget, because that experience is actually what's going to keep bringing me back to honoring that boundary. If it feels like a checklist and just a performance thing, then it's probably not going to be sustainable.
And, the thing that's coming into my mind is, to that point, like, it's not a performance thing, but it's understanding that everything I put into my life has an effect on me.
Yep.
I think about water and erosion. The Grand Canyon was caused by erosion.
Wow.
And so what are those spigots that I need to close off in my life?
Yeah.
Because it may not feel like it, but the little things that I let in, they impact my soul in a way that maybe I might not perceive until I take it out of my life and I go, wow, I feel so much better now that I haven't been doing these 6 things.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple points, and it's just important as we'll kind of give some practicals here. The purpose of these boundaries are to help keep us from placing ourselves in a difficult situation that may bring up temptation. We're just trying to keep ourselves from placing in the wrong neighborhoods And it's important to think about this. How do you can phrase your boundaries in the shortest way possible that you'll be able to bring them to memory quickly? And then finally, just looking at each of your boundary areas that we're unpacking, as we unpacked a little bit on the prior podcast, taking note of those areas that trigger you the most, or maybe often result in a temptation, being brutally honest with that and knowing, again, back to that commitment, the secret sauce to commitment is sacrifice. I've got to be willing to sacrifice this so that I can walk in this new way of life. And I like to think of kind of being in this, everything looks gray. And when I start putting these boundaries in conjunction with working the recovery process, it's not a behavioral modification, but it's getting to the root, and recovery starts happening. If we can take a new path in life, in fact, this highway out here we have close to us, if they blocked off one intersection, one exit to another, and you could not use that, what would begin to happen to that pavement?
Yeah, there'd be grass that would start to grow in between it.
Yeah. And so it's a good picture to think about, and this is kind of what we're doing is not just to behave and do the checklist thing. What would it be like in our recovery if we took a different path in our life? What's something new that would be able to grow if we took a new route? And just thinking about that, it's like it's not just about stopping, it's about allowing something new to grow. And if we stop driving on those paths that used to lead us to destruction, we're actually creating space for something new to grow. So it's just good to think about that. We're actually bringing life into our recovery as we get the old out.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. It's cutting away those things. It's like pulling weeds out of the garden so that we can let something else grow. Yeah, I love it.
So let's continue that conversation then. We kind of tied social media. I want to hit that just one more time because it's such a big topic.
Yeah.
Because if we're being honest, especially in the area of sexual addiction, pornography, that kind of deal, masturbation, there's things that we can see on there that can be pretty overt triggers.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So we know that. But what about we talked about this, you were talking about just binging, video games and binging Netflix. Is one of the most convicting things when you see that question, are you still watching? It's like, oh, how long have I been here? It's like my TV's even asking me if I'm still watching, maybe I need to take a break. But we can do that with social media too. And maybe speak into, Andy, because I think this is important. Back to the lies, and we're talking about that cycle a couple podcasts before, the lies that we're believing can lead to temptation and then ultimately acting out and finishing that cycle can lead to hopelessness. Just the act of just consuming too much social media.
Yeah.
I may not be watching anything that's directly tied to my recovery or my area of addiction or whatever, but how does that affect me?
Yeah.
Just in your experience.
Well, there's a couple things that pop in my head. I think the first thing is that when I find myself, especially there's a lot of different apps that have like short videos on there. And like that is what I've experienced is like, man, that is a black hole right there. And even just the idea of scrolling, even in our brain, there's endorphins that are and dopamine that is being released as we do it because there's a sense of novelty of I don't know what else is going to pop up.
Yeah.
I don't know what else is going to pop up. And, every 20th thing we find, oh, that's a really funny meme or, oh, that was a funny video. I wonder where the next one is.
Yeah.
And so it gets us caught in this loop there where for me and my brain, I can get caught in that. I can get preoccupied with that. And I can find myself just numbing myself in that. And if I do that late at night, rather than going to bed at 10:30, I'm going to bed at 1:30, which that has an effect on me. And then it can also, as I'm looking at all those other things, I'm going to come into something triggering in that place too.
Yeah. A little bit more to unpack on that. Maybe we'll stick there and then we'll move on. But great conversation with Andy talking about boundaries and the importance of that. So we'll continue when we come back. Stick with us. Hey friends, are you looking for a meeting near you? You can join us online every Wednesday, or you can join us in person. Either way, go to celebraterecovery.com for more information on our online open share group, or find a group near you. Being in person is so critical. Go to celebraterecovery.com/CR groups, and we hope to see you in person at a group near you. Celebraterecovery.com for more information. So Andy, right before the break, we were talking about just that kind of just numbing out and that craving the next funny video. And it just got me thinking, that's kind of how there's a science behind what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
It's the sounds. It's even thinking about notifications, right? You post something and how we can just be drawn to, has anybody else liked it? Has anybody shared it? Does anybody say anything about it? And we can kind of become addicted to filling that void. I'm thinking about the loneliness piece that we were talking about. It can be a little bit misguiding and misinformation for us. It feels like it's filling a void, but it's actually, it's never satisfied.
Yeah.
As soon as I get a like, well, when's the next one?
Yep.
Or just like you were talking about the videos, it's like, is there going to be another one? What if I miss it? And then we can get stuck in this trap, and we look up and I've been doing this for an hour. I just wasted an hour of my life.
Yep.
And guilty. I've been there, right?
Yeah,
and so
me too.
It's just being mindful. Okay, how do you feel walking away from that?
Yeah.
And it's not just like, you just need to behave better. It's being aware. And so it's a good exercise just to think about, when you binge Netflix, do you walk away feeling better?
Yeah.
Do you feel life came to you? Nothing wrong with it.
No,
there's nothing wrong with that. But if you find yourself, does it put you in a vulnerable spot? And now you find yourself, as we move into that next boundary, now you're kind of digging and exploring other things on the internet.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think even just when I find myself in that place, can I have the courage to pause and say, why am I doing this right now?
Yeah.
Why am I watching this Netflix show? Is it because I've had a long day and I'm trying to unplug?
Yeah.
And there's some things that I'm frustrated with that I'm just trying to stuff?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Whatever those emotions, whatever those other triggers that we've had throughout the day, whatever those are, that maybe we're trying to satiate through running to these things.
Right.
Any emotions we bury are buried alive, as a friend of ours once said.
Yeah.
And so they're going to work out in some way. And so if I'm frustrated about the day and maybe I got home late from work and I'm just, I'm going to sit here and scroll on my phone.
Yeah.
And I find myself an hour and a half in and I've caught a couple funny videos and I'm searching for stuff. Maybe at that point I've also ran into 2 or 3 other things that were a little triggering, but they were small.
Justify it.
Justify it. It's okay. It's like,
yeah.
Ooh, that's all right. I'll reset my settings later and,
Yep.
But before long I'm hitting that again. And one trigger I may be able to go, oh, all right, okay. Let's get out of here. Let's go. But if I'm sitting there for 2 hours and I hit a dozen of them, it's putting me in a vulnerable spot.
Yeah.
And before I know it, I'm clicking on links.
Yep.
I'm searching hashtags.
Yeah.
I'm running to websites I shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And it sets us up into these places that it makes us more vulnerable to go to neighborhoods we wouldn't have normally gone to unless we hadn't have been softened up to it for the time before that.
Yeah. So I love that. And so maybe there's some boundaries. Okay, well, I have to have internet for my job and nothing wrong with social media. So maybe the boundaries, and again, this is for you to figure out and talk with your sponsor, throw it by the accountability partners. Like I find myself binge watching for 2.5, 3 hours, right? And then I feel, ugh. Is maybe you put a time limit.
Yes.
Maybe you say, I'm only gonna look at my Facebook for 30 minutes, and maybe I need a timer. And when that goes off, I'm committed, and I'm gonna make a sacrifice. Maybe I turn it off. I toss my phone on the other side of the room, or go put it on the mantle, whatever that is, because my recovery is too important. Because I know that, to your point, I'm vulnerable, and I've hit some triggers. We talk about that with relapse, right? The act of the relapse, or the acting out in that cycle, it's not the first time that's entering the equation. There is some preoccupation, some ritualization that's happened, and sometimes without even knowing it, when we've got stuck in that flywheel of the media or social media, the internet, we're in a vulnerable spot, and the acting out is just the finale of what's been happening over a progression.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and to that timer aspect, there's such what I love about our technology that we have nowadays is that even built into most of our phones, there are settings where we can monitor those things.
Some people probably don't even know that.
Some people don't even know it, and but it's a really easy, practical thing that we can do. I do that on my phone, and it's some of the best things for me.
Yeah.
And so there's that aspect. There's also like accountability software. I'm getting ready to pick up my 7-year chip for my pornography addiction.
Yeah.
I have an internet filter on my phone.
Yeah.
Because it's a healthy boundary for me, because I know somebody else is seeing it.
Yeah.
And that gives me comfort.
For sure.
So like, what are those things? Who are the people that have the passwords for your accounts? My wife has all of my passwords for my stuff.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's this idea, especially when it comes to the internet.
Yeah.
What a great idea it would be if I could use the internet and I never felt like I had anything to hide.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and maybe I only use the internet in the presence of the living room where my wife is, or whatever,
absolutely.
That kind of thing. So filters, accountability, where am I doing it? Is there a time limit? Obviously, the boundary of substances, if we're in the area of substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, I'm setting boundaries on that. We'll talk more about the abstaining, with the things we abstain from. But I want to make that point, just understanding too, especially with something like food or like cigarettes. If I think about when I smoke, I tend to feel like I have to have something in my other hand to drink, right?
Yep.
So I need to be aware of that. And I always tell guys, if you're coming in with multiple issues, one issue at a time, right? So if you're smoking, don't try to quit everything at once. Focus on the alcohol, and then we'll work on the nicotine. But be mindful if you find yourself, every time I smoke, I do this. So maybe I need to create some boundaries around smoking as well.
Yeah.
But even food, you were talking about just feeling like blah, binging Netflix. When I eat unhealthy, a lot of junk, I feel bad about myself. I feel lethargic, and then my mind gets to that kind of the lies, and a temptation starts to creep in. I'm already worthless. Look at me. And then I'm into acting out in my area of recovery.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, food has always been one of those things for me that has always been a trigger. And, I remember in the midst of my addiction, like food always affected the way I felt about myself.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I go and eat fast food 3 times a day, what's going through my mind is I'm going to weigh more tomorrow.
Yep.
I ate way more calories than I wanted to.
Yeah.
The food actually wasn't as good as I thought it would be, and I'm out like $40.
Right.
Like
the closing costs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have the other food, games, sports, gambling, finances, overspending, that kind of thing. It's just being mindful of all these things. We're just trying to lean into what are the things that can lead to my acting out, and make some sacrifices as I'm committed fully to my recovery. But a lot of times in these boundaries, Andy, we won't carry them out because we can justify our actions and our behaviors. Well, I have to do this. What's that look like, man? I mean, that can be a vicious. It kind of fits in that accuse and excuse a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's on the back end of a relapse or acting out. But that's a pretty slippery slope, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It's like, well, I can't not go to this restaurant because that's my family's favorite restaurant to go to.
Right.
In there. And so I just don't have a choice. And what I see a lot with myself and with others, whenever those thoughts come up, is that I'm throwing myself into a false dichotomy of I can never do this because of this.
Right.
And it's like, I don't think that's really the answer. And for me, what I've realized is oftentimes it's because I haven't talked to the person I need to talk. There's a relational aspect to it of I haven't talked to the person I need to talk to about it, because there's a little bit of shame that's keeping me from wanting to admit that this is something I feel like I need to do.
Right. So we're cutting off all other options. We're trying to keep us out of those bad neighborhoods. We're trying to cut off those options, put those to death, and kind of we talked about kind of what the key to recovery is not. Share what that is, Andy. What is that? What are we trying to unpack here?
Yeah, the key to recovery is not just stopping the action. The key to recovery is never going back to those again. Because the reality is that we've probably stopped those things hundreds of times.
Yeah.
But the key is knowing that I never have to go back to that space. That's when I was able to shift that in my mind, that I am actually free to not look at porn.
Yeah.
I'm free to not drink again.
Yeah.
I'm free to not fall back into, oh man.
I don't have to start again.
Yeah.
And that's such a good frame with these boundaries to kind of help us. So honestly evaluating our boundaries, just remember it represents a powerful start to our recovery. And remember, the work that we're doing in Step Study is helping us to deal with the roots of that so that we can keep from going back to those nasty places. And it is honoring and carrying out these boundaries is demonstrating our commitment to changing the way we live. And if we're being honest, this can be difficult, but you'll begin to, even though your body in that space may think, I'm going to die if I don't have this, right? You will discover that you won't die without this. There will be life after this. In fact, much, much better life. So, Andy, thanks for unpacking boundaries with me, man. This has been a good conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, we hope this has been a helpful conversation as we wrap up the proactive approach of setting boundaries in our life so that we can walk in these difficult spaces and really kind of cut off all those other things, those options that were leading us to death. Remember, you won't die without this fix. I promise you. You will experience new life, and you'll begin to see life in a different light, and the color will begin to come back into your life, and you'll join millions of other people that have done this process we call Celebrate Recovery. Hey, if you want to find a group, again, go to celebraterecovery.com. Lots of information there. Thanks for being with us today. We hope you'll join us next time. Until then, God bless.